Welcome to Positive Recovery MD. If you're listening, chances are you want to create happiness around you and thrive in your life. We're glad you're here and you've come to the right place. This podcast will inspire and motivate you to not merely survive your recovery journey, we'll give you the tools to build or strengthen your foundation to thrive and flourish in your life. Each week, we'll come together as a community to have authentic conversations around addiction, recovery, and what matters. Growth and progress, not perfection. All while developing positive habits for you to utilize in your life. To learn more, please visit positiverecoverymd.com to sign up to receive the daily positive interventions that we'll review, as well as gain access to exclusive Positive Recovery content available only to Positive Recovery MD listeners. All right, let's get started.
Hello, boys and girls, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another installment of Positive Recovery MD with your hosts, Dr. Jason Powers, Julie DeNofa, and we have a special guest. Julie's going to introduce.
Yeah, I'm super stoked to have Tricia Lewis, the creator and host of Recovery Happy Hour podcast with us. In learning a little bit about Tricia, she talks about how for years she was emotionally and physically addicted to alcohol, but was really, really good at making it look like she did not have a problem. She has been sober since November of 2016, and she has described her life as being better than she could have ever imagined it. She had the fear of missing out at one point in her recovery story. I'm sure you'll hear about that. Fear of missing out is what keeps so many of us from giving sobriety a solid chance. That fear is the biggest liar, and it, according to Tricia, wasted so much of her time. She has a fantastic Recovery Happy Hour podcast where she believes that hearing stories that we can all relate to is what gets and helps keep people sober. She loves to share stories by interviewing sober people from all over the globe to show you that your life will not end when you quit drinking. So she likes to talk about if you're still wrestling with the idea of quitting or afraid of what label you'll have, you're not alone. Going as far as to say that you don't even have to identify as an alcoholic to question your relationship with alcohol. I hope that the stories that she shares on her Recovery Happy Hour podcast will inspire many of you. So we want you all to take a trip over and subscribe to Recovery Happy Hour podcast with Tricia Lewis. She is absolutely the creator and host of that. I can't wait to hear a little bit more of that. She also believes that there is life beyond the bottle, and it's a life worth living. Tricia, thanks so much for being with us here today.
Yeah, it's my pleasure. That was a nice little write-up. I don't know where you got that from.
So I got to tell my story, and I had a really fun time with Tricia. I do remember that standing out, and it was a while ago. I'm not sure when it's going to drop, but it was a pleasure just being interviewed by you and hanging out with you. And, you know, somebody who has two jobs and her own podcast, we're honored that you're, giving us this time. So thank you very much.
My pleasure. No, I'm so happy to be here. Yeah, that was a fun episode to record. So thank you. Thanks for having me.
So let our guests know what it was like, what happened, and what it's like now.
Yeah. Well, it's funny the way that you introduced me, and I forget. So I'm sure it's somewhere on my website that I was good, or maybe in my press kit that I had a problem, a really bad problem with my addiction to alcohol, and was really good at making it look like I didn't. First and foremost, I just want to stress that is not unique. that doesn't mean that I'm any better at this. Like so many of us wrestle with that. And that is why for me, it was so hard to just say after a while, okay, this is a problem and I've got to stop. I've always been an overachiever and a perfectionist. I grew up in a family with addiction. And my older brother was more of the stereotypical addict and alcoholic. That was my experience, was somebody who knew how to really blow up their life and disrupt the lives of everybody around them. And for the record, he just celebrated 5 years clean and sober. So he's doing great. I always want to make sure that everybody doesn't think that this person is still ruining my life. He's not. He's a great joy, and we're just the best of friends. But knowing like that was my experience with addiction. So growing up and trying to be this like perfect child and sort of somehow overcompensate for my brother all the time and, learn those codependent habits of like, how can I try to please everybody else all the time? How can I take care of everyone else's needs? And so as I started drinking in high school, just sort of recreationally, like a lot of high schoolers do, I do remember that the first time I drank was to not feel my feelings. The very first time. It wasn't like, we're at a party, let's try a wine cooler. It was, no, I got dumped by somebody that I thought I loved, and I drank 3 shots of whiskey in a row. And I was 16. Like if
the first time you drank?
First time I drank. That doesn't say like this girl's probably drinking for the wrong reasons. I don't know what does. I did not.
Well, what do you mean wrong reasons? I mean, isn't that what movies tell us to do, right? He leaves you drink. He comes back, drink twice, right?
I think that I always grew up thinking that like you were supposed to drink because you were celebrating and it's fun at a party. And it was to enjoy it, not to escape. You didn't see any Westerns, did you? No, I didn't. I'm a 39-year-old girl. I was born in 1981. Of course not. I drank to escape from the get-go, though. I liked to change the way that I felt because I've always been really good at controlling things. So if I could change my environment, change my mood, if I could control something, I wanted to do it. So that was my relationship with alcohol from the beginning. But being this high achieving perfectionist and knowing the damage that addiction can cause, I was always very protective of how I drank and wanted to make sure that I didn't bother anybody else with it. I didn't want to upset anybody. I didn't want anyone to hurt over me. So I just was very, especially as I grew into an adult and went to culinary school and became a chef and was in the restaurant industry, where you drink hard. I mean, it's just an industry of pirates. And it was like working on a pirate ship for like 20 years. I was very driven to achieve and succeed, but I also was able to drink as much as anybody around me and then get up at 5 a.m. the next day and do it all over again. Work 15 hours, go home, drink, party, get a few hours of sleep, get up and do it again the next day. Rinse, repeat for a long, long time. And in a way, I feel like that was almost an addiction as much as the alcohol was just trying to make sure that I was controlling how it looked. I wasn't your typical, I never got a DWI, never got into explosive fights. It started to get really bad in my mid 30s. I got a divorce that was a surprise. Found out my ex-husband was having several affairs and my whole life changed in a day. And that on its own is hard enough for anybody to cope with. So when you know that this bottle of alcohol is always really good at changing the way you feel, like that's when just the rubber hit the road. And that I always use my divorce as a timestamp because that's when it became a problem that was undeniable. And that's when I really leaned on this, that I needed this thing every day. So for about a year, that last year and a half of my drinking, I was divorced and running a business and very well and growing a business and working all the time, but drinking all the time. And I just physically started to feel horrible. And that's also when I became physically dependent on it as well. I always knew that I could sleep better if I drank before bed, but this was where when I woke up, it wasn't a hangover anymore. It was a detox. And, it felt really good to have a glass of white wine first thing in the morning because then I didn't feel as bad and, nonstop heartburn and it just horrible. And I've always been a blackout drinker. And I just started to realize what a risk I was to myself. Would wake up in the morning covered in bruises, no idea where they were from.
Drunk bumps.
Yeah. I had a friend who called them, stripper bruises. I'm not sure why. Something.
Oh, wow. You sure?
I don't know. I've never been around a pole, so I don't know. But yeah, I'd wake up, and really just I was always falling down. I'm klutzy enough as it is, and then you put a couple of bottles of wine in me and a few martinis, and I'm just a human disaster. I'm smart enough to know that this can kill people, and I'm smart enough to know that my death by falling down a flight of stairs while drunk alone would be a really embarrassing way to die. So I decided enough was enough. I woke up one morning and couldn't shake the hangover. And by 9:00 that night, still felt just as bad and realized the following morning. So this is a little over a day after not drinking. That's when my kidneys started to hurt. That's when my whole body, cold sweats at night. That's when I realized, oh, okay, this is physical withdrawal. Like this is really happening. And I always knew I was going to have to quit someday. And it just slapped me in the face that day. Like, okay, this is happening now. For the record, if you are a daily drinker, don't detox alone. Talk to your doctor. What I did was very unsafe. And it took 3 days for me to feel somewhat normal. I felt like I had the flu for about 3 days. And even after those 3 days, I was like, okay, well, maybe I'll listen to some podcasts and drink a bunch of green juices and maybe just dry out for a couple of weeks. Like I still had those thoughts, even though I had 3 solid days of my internal organs screaming at me and having physical withdrawals. So I started listening to a podcast and hearing people's stories. And this whole time, the last 5 years of my drinking, the thing that I struggled with the most was like, well, is my problem bad enough? I'm not living under a bridge. I'm not disrupting anyone's life. Like, do I really have a problem? I don't think am I an alcoholic? Am I not? Like, that was what wasted so much of my mental energy. So when I started hearing other people's stories that sounded like mine, I finally realized I wasn't the only person that was high functioning. I thought I was the only one. We all think we're so unique that we're the only people that have this problem, that we're the only people that can drink as much as we drink and like hold a job and make money. I mean, it's crazy how much time we waste going, is my problem bad enough? Yeah, it finally clicked and snapped into place when I heard people's stories that sounded just like mine. One woman in particular, I heard her story. She said that she went to a 12-step meeting. So I was like, well, I'll try it. I just considered it data. Okay, maybe I'll just go and just see how this makes me feel. I wasn't going to spill my guts and cry. I just wanted to see what I could learn. And so I went to a meeting and I met a whole bunch of people and their stories sounded like mine too. And we all related to each other. And I thought that was a really cool thing. So in the beginning, my recovery plan was 12-step meetings and recovery podcasts. And that's what I did. And I was still just trying to kind of figure this whole thing out. But I knew, especially after that first week, I was like, I've gone a whole week. And that's the first time I've done that. And I don't know how long. And I don't want to start from scratch. I think we're really going to do it this time. And as soon as I had that shift in perspective, like, okay, I've decided there's no more going back and forth. Am I or am I not? It's decided. This is my new life now. I'm making this choice. Now let's move in that direction. And I think that making that decision was so important and making this process a lot easier when you're not always fighting with yourself. Am I going to go back? Do I want to drink? Do I not want to drink? Like, I'd done that for so long. So over that first year, I would say I was doing anything and everything I possibly could to learn about recovery. If somebody said it was going to help, I tried it. 12-step podcasts. I've always been in therapy, meditations, books, all the juices, all the yoga, like everything. And I tried it all. I didn't do it all the time. Some of it worked, some of it didn't, but I figured out what I wanted and I did those things. And I just did what worked and what felt good. And then something stopped feeling good. I tried something else. And I never got too attached to just one thing. I did use 12-step pretty heavy that first year and a half. I worked the steps with a sponsor. Not something I really do anymore, but I've also got a ton of other great things that work for me. And over the last 4 years, that's what I've done is, a big part of that too is I used a Facebook accountability group. So I had lots of people where I could log in anytime, day or night, and say, hey, I'm feeling this. Is this weird? Is this normal? And people go, no, me too. And you give each other advice. And so I had that accountability. And the other important thing I did to help this stick was I told people, like everyone around me, not everyone at once, it was step by step. I had like my first couple of weeks people, and then I had my first month people, and then you kind of widen that circle over time. But having that accountability makes it real and makes it a lot harder to change your mind. So I knew that if I didn't start telling people, I was going to talk myself out of it again. So doing all of the things, trying all the things, and not being too committed to just doing one thing one way forever, and having that flexibility is what's made this stick for the last 4 years.
That's incredible. Julie, I'm sure you're thinking what I'm thinking. Like, first of all, the gift of desperation is something that sort of catalyzes that decision-making that you made with a much higher bottom. That is, when people are like desperate, like a drowning person, they're like, okay, I have no other choice. But you were running a successful business and there was all these things you hadn't done yet. So for you to have like made that decision, it's rare, quite frankly. And, we treat people that we wish would make that decision a lot earlier than having to watch them go down. Was there any epiphanies or any advice you can give somebody? This is probably why you created your podcast, I bet, because it does sound like it. But, people people are ready when they're ready. However, I wasn't ready, but I went into rehab because I was intervened on. I had no choice. And so my negative consequences were so bad. And yet something happened. The decision was kind of easy once I saw the solution. And I think maybe that's what you were talking about. So what advice would you give people if that's not it?
Something that's important for me to say is that I come from a whole family of addiction. So I have been around sober people and seen that I've always been exposed to people that say out loud, I used to be able to drink and then I wasn't able to do it anymore. So I had to stop altogether. And as I was drinking over time and just sort of observing like, hey, my drinking isn't as normal as it probably should be. I don't think there is any normal drinking, but like, wow, those people stop drinking when they go home. Like they have their 2 glasses of wine and then they go home and they go to bed. They don't go home and keep drinking by themselves like I do. Like those people don't talk about blacking out. Like I was observing that like, okay, this doesn't feel right. So I always had that in the back of my mind, which is why I say that I knew I was going to have to quit someday. Already having that like on my to-do list, really far down on the list, you know, I knew it was always going to be there. And I think that I was ready because I knew that my body had decided, you know, after a while, you can't negotiate with alcohol. It'll kill you. Like nobody can outsmart what alcohol will do to your body. And it is, you know, it's addictive. It's physically addictive. It's mentally addictive. So many of us are already, you know, just emotionally addicted to it. So I think it was just a perfect storm of enough being enough. But I think that for those of us that have experience with addiction around us, and we're the ones who can sort of pull it off for a while, it's easy to think you can outsmart it because I really thought I was too smart for this for a long time. But that moment when like the physical withdrawals was when I realized it won. I wasn't winning anymore. I was losing and it was winning. And it could easily take my life. Like I just kept having this vision of myself dead at the bottom of a flight of stairs. You know, I was living alone. I didn't have anyone to take care of me.
How many cats?
And I have no cats, but I have a very large dog. It was too risky. You know, I just couldn't trust myself after one, which is another reason why I was drinking at home alone. It wasn't because I necessarily wanted to isolate. It was because I was too dangerous when I went out. I never knew what was going to happen to me. So I drank at home alone for my own safety more than anything else.
No, if you still woke up with bruises drinking alone, I can't imagine what it would be like with other people. Like bumper.
If I can't make it that 10 feet to my bed and I'm covered in bruises, that just tells you how like klutzy I am. It's bad.
Awesome. That's awesome. And Julie, I like I like her metaphor for, you know, social connections, and that we have like the immediate group and then the 1 week group and then the 1 month group. And, you know, it's always sort of hard when I'm in the 1 month group and I think I'm in the week group or the day. Like, I can't believe I'm just learning that right now.
Yeah.
So anyway, that's awesome. And alcohol and other drugs, I should say, actually age you, right? And as much as you drank, you look like you're not even 20. I mean, your kid looks like an infant. And so I don't believe, like, it'd be hard for me to believe you drank that much.
Okay. First of all, that's just genetics. That's also photofacials.
I don't know what that is, but
yeah, it's all right. It makes your skin look like an infant is what it does. No, it will absolutely age you. I mean, none of us are immune to the fact that alcohol will fucking kill you. Like There is no getting around that. And so I don't care how well you can disguise your wine and your Yeti. I don't care how much money you have in the bank and how expensive your Scotch collection is. It will kill you. It will, and none of us can outsmart that. Like that is so important. We can't, we are not bigger than alcohol. We might be temporarily, but after a while it always wins.
Yeah. And, you know, Tricia, you mentioned that you detox at home, you know, and even 3 days into it, you realize that your body was screaming at you. And I just want to make sure that our listeners know that, yes, sometimes people are able to detox at home, but really an alcohol detox can be fatal. So there are treatment options for folks out there who require a medical detox. So I just want for our listeners to know that
yes,
is a medical component to it. You are at higher risk for seizures. You're at higher risk for a hypertensive crisis. And I'm so glad that you did not experience any of the medical complications around that. But I think it's important for folks who maybe have some co-occurring medical issues to really, if they're thinking about stopping drinking, maybe stop and talk to someone about it as well. And that's why folks like Dr. Jason Powers and other folks that specialize in addiction medicine can be so integral as part of your treatment team. I know that the program of the 12 steps actually helps a lot of people to get sober, and there's a lot of options out there. And I love to hear that you explore all of that on the Recovery Happy Hour.
Absolutely. That's one of the things that I started Recovery Happy Hour about, I was a little under 2 years sober. It was 1.5 years, something like that. And I started it because of all the sober podcasts I was listening to, I just kept hearing the drunk stories and like up into the time that they quit. And I'm like, well, that's great, but what happens next? Like, life doesn't end there. Like in my experience, it's really just kind of opening up. So I wanted to start a podcast that really talked about beyond that. Like I'm tired of the same drunk stories. I'm not there anymore. Like that serves a very important purpose. It certainly did for me to hear those, but I needed to graduate to what was next. So I created a podcast, partially as service work, but also to address that person like myself that had that fear of missing out, that couldn't imagine a life without alcohol being fun. The biggest struggle wasn't just putting the bottle down, was whether or not I even should. You know, we are just sold this image that you have to hit this rock bottom and, you know, live under the bridge with the brown paper bag. I have yet to find this bridge where all the people with the brown paper bags are. And not to make light of, you know, like homelessness and poverty, of course, like that's totally real. But like that rock bottom isn't my story. And I know that there's lots of people that identify with my story. So it's probably not a lot of other people's stories.
What do you think when people say like, oh, we have to raise the bottom, right? Like you hear people say that. What do you think when you hear people say that?
You know, I think even using the word bottom is such a trope, you know? I think that anybody can stop and go reevaluate your relationship with alcohol. Like when you take the words bottom and problem and addict out of it, and you just say, hey, here's this thing in my glass, and sometimes it's making life a lot harder than it should be. I'm going to reevaluate this and just kind of think on how this is serving me. Is it still serving me? Where is it enmeshed in my life? You know, how is it affecting my job? How is it affecting my relationship with my family? Like those are really natural, easy, non-pressured questions to ask yourself. You don't have to talk about like, I'm broken and I have this disease and like this forlorn, like, oh, this is my punishment. Like, no, just like take control of something that's making your life miserable and ask yourself questions. You're the boss of your own life. You're allowed to, you know, God, look at the decisions we have when we buy a car, you know, like, and that's something you have for like 5-10 years. We're talking about a decision over something that is ruining your life. Yeah. Like shop, you know, like do your own shopping for it, you know, get your own data.
So with you, you say that there's life beyond the bottle and it's a life worth living. What's been most meaningful to you in your recovery and your sobriety?
Probably just stopping doing the things that I hated. You know, there were so many things that I did because I thought I should, because I was such a people pleaser, you know, because if I said one time that I was going to do this thing, then I better do that thing forever. And I better be the best at it. Like I made all my decisions like that. That has nothing to do with alcohol, but that's the stuff I drink over. You know, the anxiety over having to make all of those mental checklists all the time is what drove me to drink. So it's not really about the alcohol. Like that's the other thing I want people to hear. It's not about the liquid in your glass. It's what's making you want to put that glass to your mouth all the time.
What's most I know in your life right now?
Most meaningful in my life, most meaningful thing in my life is probably, well, I guess it's kind of on the same vein, is the fact that I can be present in it and have my own free agency to say, I want to do this thing, you know, whether it's change careers and close a business, which is what I did last year, which after a 20-year career of doing the exact same thing over and over and every day, I had the guts to do and say, I don't like this. I want to do this other thing now. So I'm going to do that.
What do you do now?
I'm the assistant to the CEO of a restaurant group now. So still in a similar industry, but working, a sort of a more office-y kind of job. and I love it. Love it. It's so fun. And I had so much ego over when I owned my business of like getting to write my own paychecks and, like I'm the boss of everything. And after a while, I realized like, wow, this is a lot harder than it really needs to be. It's not bringing me any joy anymore. And I can decide to stop doing it. When I was drinking, I would have dragged that decision on for another 10 years because I thought, I should. I was always shoulding on myself like my whole life. So I don't do that anymore.
Awesome. So many things you say are part of the vernacular of positive psychology, by the way. And if you ever want another, not career, but another enrichment, you should think about applying and getting a master's at Penn under the giants, because you're definitely a mapster, like your sunny disposition and things you say. And on that piece, when Julie asked you the question, you said, what brings you the most joy and meaning? And you're answered by the negative of what used to be harmful, not by not doing things. And when I sort of teach people like an introduction to what is happiness, I always ask them, what makes you happy and why do you spend so much time not doing it? Sort of in the same, like, it's awesome.
I think that's actually a side effect of codependency as a survival mechanism. It's like, hey, look, everything around me is on fire. Don't worry. Everything's fine. We're going to be fine. I'm going to love us better. Like, that's like having that, like, that's my first instinct is just that positivity out of like survival. But now I can actually use it in a way that's authentic and healthy.
All right. So I'm going to ask you some questions, just off top of your head answer, but do a couple of fun ones. What's your favorite color and 3 adjectives that describe why it's your favorite color?
That describe why it's my favorite color.
That describe the color, rather.
Okay. Green.
Okay.
Down to earth, warm, and comfortable.
And your favorite animal and 3 adjectives also.
River otter. A river otter. Very specific. Not a sea otter, a river otter.
Small claw river otter, right?
I don't. The ones that like play games with each other nonstop.
Yep.
Like those. Yeah. I could watch them for hours.
Like Addie.
3 adjectives for them: playful, energetic, and I guess playful and silly are the same. Spontaneous.
Awesome. So awesome. What's your favorite sound?
It's funny because I listen to so much music. I'm thinking of like actual songs that are my favorite sound. I mean, this is my favorite sound is probably a bluegrass band in the middle of Telluride, Colorado. Like, that's my favorite sound.
I love that.
What's your least favorite sound?
Breaking glass.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
You could do something as a profession other than what you're doing or have done. What do you think you'd love to have a go at?
If I could start all over, I think I would have been a great realtor. I mean, if I could, if I had done everything from the beginning, I think I would have been a realtor. I think right now, if I could do anything else, I don't know. I feel like I need 300 lifetimes because there's so many things I want to do. That's a tough one. And I mean, could I make like playlists on Spotify for a living? Like, that would be great. That person who makes the themed playlists on Spotify, that's what I would do.
Bing. What profession would you loathe doing if you had to do day in and day out forever?
I would never want to be the president of the United States.
Yeah.
Too much pressure, too many eyes on you.
Won't vote for you.
I care. I care too much about what people think of me.
Yeah, that's suicide if you're.
Yeah. Having a podcast and hearing strangers criticize you is bad enough. I can't imagine what it's like to be the leader of the free world.
You wake up and it's just a crisis every minute until you end up dead.
I just lost a bunch of hair just thinking about that.
What turns you on?
I don't know. Can you be more specific?
What gets your engine revving? It sounds like just your pulse.
Yeah.
You seem to be the kind of person you wake up, you don't need anything to get going. So
I'm kind of a go-getter. I mean, like, I think what really kind of gets me going is being around groups of people that have the same energy as me. And getting that like reciprocation, which is obviously lacking in our world right now. So It's weird. Everything's weird.
What turns you off?
What turns me off is people that refuse to listen.
Okay.
Just people that want to talk and don't want to listen.
And let's assume there's a God. When you die and you're going into heaven, what would you like to hear God say to you?
Well done, good and faithful soldier.
That's
awesome. So at Positive Recovery, we have the Positive Recovery Daily Guide, which we are sending you your very own copy. So I'm going to read out of the Positive Recovery Daily Guide. It starts with a quote by William Ng. Boredom is a certain sign that we are allowing our faculties to rust in idleness. One common trigger for addicts is boredom, and difficulty concentrating usually accompanies the feeling of having nothing to do and lacking interest. Boredom is consistently listed as a major trigger for relapse and can signify a wide state of unwanted, uninvited, and distasteful emotional states of being. Boredom can also refer to being uncomfortable in one's own skin. The remedy for boredom is to get busy developing positive habits, counteracting the bad stuff, and living the good life. This remedy is also the formula for effectively pursuing happiness. Notice how the formula for flourishing in recovery does not pursue happiness directly. Rather, the path to living the best life possible in recovery is populated with the multitude of actions whose side effects create well-being. Flourishing in recovery includes developing your character strengths, nurturing deep and long-lasting relationships, and working towards meaningful goals. It involves courageously taking responsibility for your life, practicing realistic optimism, and being part of something larger than the self. Boredom, meanwhile, is a signal you have temporarily forgotten all you can do to get better every day and in every way. So the positive intervention for today was to create a boredom alleviator list. Reflect on the paragraph above and list at least 12 life-enhancing things that you can proactively do the next time that you are bored. These do not all need to be strictly task-oriented. Powerful, too, is sitting in quiet mindfulness or practicing loving kindness and meditation. If you're bored today, pick one activity and practice it. Share your list and look for other creative ways to stave of the big B of boredom. So, did you have fun creating this list?
I did.
Because I think you're a list maker. I feel like you're a list maker.
Thank you for just summarizing my life. Yes. That's why I'm the assistant to the CEO, is because I'm a great organizer and list maker.
Yes. We all need list makers, but tell me a little bit about your list for boredom.
So my list for boredom, this was fun because I tried not to think of task things, because I could easily come up with a gajillion chores. Playing the auto harp, because that was my COVID hobby, was I learned how to play the auto harp. Read my collection of old 17 magazines that I kept from the 90s. I kept all of them, and I'm so glad I did. They're hilarious.
All the fashion comebacks.
Oh my God. I'll look at the ads and it's like, that's Angelina Jolie in a Sears ad. It's so funny. Seriously. Yeah. So I read old 17 magazines when I'm bored. I'll use my Insight Timer app on my phone and do a meditation, journal, love to journal all the time. Call a friend on the phone, the old fashioned way, not text them and say, do you want to talk? Just call them and say, how are you? Walk my dog, or try to teach her to do a new trick. Make a themed playlist on Spotify, always. Doodle or color, get an adult coloring book, with markers. I think those are fun. Bake something or watch an episode of the Great British Baking Show.
My favorite.
I'm obsessed.
I made a pavlova the other day. It was so good.
That is huge. Look at you and your meringue.
Yeah.
Wow. I was a pastry chef for the first 10 years of my culinary career, and have been burnt out for years. And I started watching the Great British Baking Show recently, and I'm on fire now. I'm I want to make all those weird Gaelic tea breads that nobody can pronounce. So bake something or watch the Great British Baking Show. Go through my books and either find old ones to reread or clean them out and send them to people. Make stationery or roam through a bookstore.
Okay.
Wow. I totally love your list. I love it. And I hope that our listeners really take to heart that list, because I think so often, you're right, Tricia, that people just start creating task lists of things that are very different than how you went about yours. I'm curious, what kind of dog do you have?
She is a Black Lab Pit Bull mix.
Okay. And
70 pounds of pure love.
Ooh. What was the last theme Spotify list that you made?
My friend and I traded playlists where actually I think we had we went through a whole count, like a month, and like every day it gave you a very particular feeling to describe. And so we both did this and then traded them. So it was very complex and like way too like intricate, but it was, all I can say is it was specific AF.
Awesome. Well, thanks for sharing that list. Dr. Powers, do you have any on your list?
I do. And instead of reading them, I mean, because Tricia's list was really inspiring, I had a harder time doing it now during this pandemic because I was not avoiding tasks. Your lists are wonderful. I've done this before and it was a lot easier because the opportunity for me to go and do 20 things have now been closed. Right.
I know it's trickier right now. And it's also tricky because try making a list that doesn't involve buying something. You know, how many of us buy things as a hobby or as like a way of distracting ourselves? So if you try to take like consumerism out of the picture, it leaves a lot of room for creativity.
You are so right. I was locked out of Amazon for like 3 weeks and I was so productive.
And you're still alive? Look at you. And, but you also made a pavlova. So look at the trade-off, you know?
Yes, I did.
Yeah, I think anything you can do with your hands, creative expression, whatever that looks like. Maybe start a podcast. That's a great way to be creative. But like creativity is, like that, you're releasing like stored up grief when you do that. Like there's healing in coloring, in doing a coloring book. Like people don't understand that the power of creative expression and also the vastness of creative expression. So like I said, if that's making stationery out of old 17 magazines from the 90s, that's actually doing something for your emotions, believe it or not.
Dude,
I have the 90210 cards.
Oh.
So I have a recommendation and a request. So the first recommendation would be on YouTube. There's a Japanese guy. I think he calls himself, I don't even know, but his otter as a pet that he chronicles every day is named Addie, A-T-Y. So cute. You should.
I'm writing this down. I'm into it. Don't even know it. It's already my favorite.
Yeah. Yeah. Like it's so cool to watch him and have fun and swim and he hangs out with a cat. There's that. And I was going to request if you could send me a Spotify exercise list, that would be well appreciated. But now I want your stationery. It's like, I want everything you create. And I just can't do too many asks. So just a playlist would be fine.
Okay. I just hope that you're into early 90s dance music.
Hell yeah. The Cure.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, no, we're going much cheaper than that. No.
Oh God. What?
Yeah. We're gonna do some Tapao and some New Shoes, and maybe we'll do some 80s. We'll do some Yaz.
Okay, that I know.
Yeah. There you go. Or let me think. Let me go back to like what we talked about.
I'm 50. So
okay, Erasure.
There you go.
There you go. You got it. I got you.
Nice. Thank you.
Well, thanks so much, Tricia, for being on our podcast today. And again, for our listeners, why don't you share information how they can listen to you?
So you can find me every Tuesday, new episodes of the Recovery Happy Hour podcast come out anywhere you listen to podcasts. You can visit my website, recoveryhappyhour.com. Follow me on social media at Recovery Happy Hour. And my contact information is on the website as well.
Thank you so much.
My pleasure.
Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you for listening in another installment of Positive Recovery MD. We hope you guys enjoyed this half as much as we did. Julie and I have been smiling for almost an hour, and we will talk to you next week.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Positive Recovery MD. Don't forget to visit positiverecoverymd.com to sign up to get your daily positive intervention sent straight to your inbox. Be sure to subscribe to Positive Recovery MD on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to your podcasts to receive an automatic download when a new episode drops. And as always, if you or someone you know needs help, visit positiverecovery.com or call 877-4SOBRIETY, which is 877-476-2743. We are here to help.